Today I want to share with you how to make a cream of soup mix. That's a shelf stable pantry staple. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nutrient-dense foods like bone broth, ferment, sourdough, and more. So if you enjoy learning about those things, consider subscribing to my channel and don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Now there are 4 ingredients that you need to make this cream of soup mix. And the first one is dry milk powder. And you can use either the non-fat dry milk powder, which is the easiest one to find at the grocery store, or if you want, you can use the whole milk dried powder. They basically create the same result. The only difference is, obviously, if you use the whole milk dried powder, the cream of soup mix will, when you reconstitute it, will be slightly richer. However, for what you gain in richness, you lose in shelf life. If you use the non-fat dry milk, this should have a shelf life for about 1 year. If you use the whole milk dry milk, then that's going to have a shelf life of about 6 months. And the reason for the difference in shelf life is because the whole milk dry milk powder still contains the fat. And fat, even if it's dried, has a shorter shelf life than the rest of these ingredients. Whatever dry milk powder that you use, you're going to need 2 cups, but don't worry about writing any of this down because I'll put a link in the description below. And when you open up the description, it'll say recipe, and you click on that, and that'll take you right to the recipe, and you can read it online or print it out. Next, you're going to need 3/4 cup of cornstarch. And if you're worried about the cornstarch being genetically modified, just look for one that says non-GMO. And those are becoming more and more common at the grocery store. Now this is the one that I found at my grocery store, and it says organic cornstarch and non-GMO. So maybe you'll find something, as I've shared with you, I live in a small town and I found this at my grocery store. So maybe you'll find something like that if you are concerned about the GMO. Next, you're going to need 1/4 cup of bouillon powder. And today I'm using chicken bouillon powder, but you can use any bouillon powder that you want. But I do recommend, if possible, to use your own homemade bouillon powder. And I have a lot of videos where I show you how to make your own bouillon powder, and you can make beef bouillon powder homemade, chicken bouillon powder, and a vegetable bouillon powder. So you have a choice, and that's what I would recommend. It's very easy to make using bone broth, broth, or stock. And this way you control what goes into your bouillon powder. You don't have to worry about having any chemicals or monosodium glutamate or things like that that are often found in the chicken bouillon powders at the grocery store. So think about making your own bouillon powder, and then you're going to need 1/4 cup. Now what about making this a cream of soup mushroom mix? Today, as I said, I'm using chicken bouillon powder, so this is going to be a chicken cream of soup mix. It's very easy to turn this into a mushroom-based cream of soup mix. All you need to do is take some dry mushrooms. They can either be ones you've dehydrated yourself or dried mushrooms that you've bought at the store. You're going to want to take 1/2 cup. You're going to want to pulverize them in a little grinder or a blender, whatever you have, and that should give you about 1/4 cup of mushroom powder. And then you would use that in place of your bouillon powder. And if you wanted it to have a few little chunks of mushrooms in it, you could just chop up a few of the dried mushrooms and add that to your 1/4 cup of mushroom powder. So you can do this with a beef bouillon powder, a chicken bouillon powder, a vegetable bouillon powder, or your dried mushroom powder. The final ingredient that you're going to need is 1 tablespoon of salt, and I'm just using a fine ground sea salt. You can use any salt you want, just make sure it's a fine ground. Now, if you're using a commercially prepared store-bought bouillon powder that contains salt, then you would eliminate this tablespoon of salt. But if you're using your homemade bouillon powder to which you've not added salt, then you need this tablespoon of salt. And there's one more optional ingredient you can add if you want, and that's some type of seasoning. And if you want to add some herbs, some dried spices, whatever the case may be, you can add up to 2 teaspoons of herbs or spices to your mix. Next, you're going to need some type of jar, and a quart-sized jar works good for the amount that we're making. And you just want to make sure that it has some type of lid. And then to make things easy to get them into the jar, I'm going to use a funnel, but you don't need this. If you don't have a funnel, a good makeshift version is just to take a paper towel and kind of roll it up a little and put it in like that, and then you can pour your ingredients into your jar. Makes it a little neater. But all we're going to do is just mix everything up into our jar. Next, once you get everything into your jar, you're going to put your lid on, and you're just going to start giving it a good shake and getting everything incorporated. Once you give this a good shake and it looks like everything's incorporated together, what you can do is put in one of these silica gel packs. I really like using these. These will keep this mixture nice and dry. They're especially helpful if you live in a humid climate. Now this is all ready to go into your pantry, and this will be shelf stable for 1 year. Now you can take it one step further if you want to try to preserve it even a little better. If you want to try to get all the air out of this and maybe even extend the shelf life past 1 year, you can take a canning lid, assuming you're using a canning jar, and you can just put it on top just as if you were getting ready to can something. And then if you have one of these handheld food saver devices, I think I've showed you all this before, you just take the little adapter to use on cans, you push this down, make sure that it's securely down, and then you just take your little food saver device. I have an old one. They actually are even more streamlined than this now. And then you just line up, there's a hole here, there's a hole here, and you line the 2 holes up, and then you turn on the power, and it sucks out all the air. And you do hear, in person you hear a slight change, which tells you that it's gotten all the air out, but I don't know if you always hear it on camera. But I'll go ahead and suck out the air, and then I'll show you how you can tell you've got a good seal. Now when you do this at home, you'll hear a slight change, and then another way you get in the sound, another way you can tell is you'll see that this is a little heavy, so it might become unattached. But if you feel, see, if you go to pick up your jar, or you think you're just going to loosen this, it's actually attached. So you just hear that sound, woof, and then you just remove this, your little jar attachment, and then you'll see this, you can't get this off with your hand. That's on very securely. So it sucked out all the air, and now I would think this will definitely extend the shelf life. Now to open this, you're going to need a little can opener, just with the dull edge. Did you hear that? Whoop. And even the stuff inside moved. Then you can take out what you want, and assuming you use this device, you can put this back on, do the same thing, suck out the air, and hopefully then extend the shelf life. But if not, that's kind of, the optional way to store it. It does have a very good shelf life regardless. So you can just put your screw top lid on, and in the pantry it goes. Alrighty, now let's reconstitute some of this so that you can see how to use this whenever you have a recipe that calls for cream of soup. Now when you're ready to reconstitute this, what you're going to need is 1 1/4 cups of cold water and 1/3 cup of your cream of soup mix. And you're going to go ahead and put this all into a saucepan, and then we're going to bring it over to the stove, and we're going to whisk it well and heat it up. Well, now we've got our wonderful cream of soup mix, and we've reconstituted by, as you saw, adding the water to the mix. We took it over to the stove, and we just kept whisking it until we brought it up to a boil. Once we brought it up to a boil, kept whisking it for about a minute or so to watch it thicken. And you'll know you have the right consistency when you dip your spoon into the mixture, and you can run your finger down the back like that, and it stays separated. Then you know you've got the right consistency. Now the amount we made here with the 1/4 cup of water and the 1/3 cup of the cream of soup mix is the equivalent of 1 can of cream of soup. So if you have a recipe that calls for a can of cream of soup, you can simply make your mix as we did and add it to your recipe. Well, if you'd like to learn how to make your own bouillon powder so that you can make this cream of soup mix 100% homemade, be sure to click on this video over here where I have a playlist that'll show you how to make a beef bouillon powder, chicken bouillon powder, and vegetable bouillon powder. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless.